Your audio quality is good. I don't see your video. I'm not. Is that something?
That might be. Let me see here.
I think I can click on you. Oh, there you go. Yeah, it's working now. Okay. Oh, wow.
I was in control of that.
I can guarantee you guys that Noah's beard is far bigger than the picture on the FindingFive website. So you should congratulate him on the accomplishment. This is what you can do.
This is just during coronavirus.
Right. This is just the quarantine beard. Okay. Yeah. But anyways, thank you, Noah. So please, Noah, just if you need anything, please let me know, and we can, get resources out to people if they need to, access anything online.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you. Before I dig in, I just want to say thank you to William and everyone else who set this up. This is a really great thing that must have taken a decent amount of effort to put together. So thanks for that. I am going to try to share my screen here. Let's see if I can make.
Yeah, there should be an option there at the bottom in the middle, like a share button.
Yeah,
if you click the arrow, if you click it, you can just share like a computer screen or just a program. So I was able to just share like PowerPoint.
Yeah, sorry, I have to do okay, never. So I might have to leave and come back. It looks like my computer won't let me share until I restart Zoom.
Okay, that's all right. Go ahead if you need to, yeah.
Will I be able to get back in? I don't.
Yes, I have now expanded. I was able to upgrade the plan. Zoom is apparently very useful. Where I was able to upgrade my plan, and then it automatically allowed people to join.
Okay. Great.
So that was a quick fix. Yeah.
All right. In that case, I will be right back.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds good. Yeah. So now we'll be entering into the very brief stand-up portion of the meeting. This is where we try to entertain you for a minute until Noah gets back. If anyone has any really good linguistics jokes, please feel free to share them on the resources page. I'm trying to think of any on the top of my head, and there's really none that are coming to mind. So I'm trying to think of good. Oh yeah, we had some jokes during CUNY about dog semantics. So like the question was, what is their logical semantic representations if they have any or not, right? So this is interesting. Jeopardy music. No Jeopardy music. I mean, I could try to, okay, Noah's back. All right. You guys are spared the continuation of the rambling. And so I will now go back into, let's see if I can unmute Noah. Can I unmute him? Yes, I can unmute him. Okay, take it away, Noah.
Okay. So I'm hoping you guys are seeing my slides.
Yeah, we can see it perfectly fine. It's like just a full screen presentation and your video is on the top.
Great. Okay. So all right, so thank you for the introduction. I'm Noah Nelson. Like William said, I just graduated in December with my PhD from the University of Arizona in linguistics. I've been working with FindingFive since I think summer of 2017, I want to say. And this all started because I was working in a lab, Masha Fezichkina's lab, actually, at the U of A. And she wanted to try out this new platform, and I was kind of the one who was charged with taking that effort in stride and kind of figuring out how to make the studies of the lab possible in FindingFive. FindingFive was at that time quite new. I mean, we still consider ourselves pretty new and pretty fresh. And so it was really kind of fun because I interacted with with Ting Qian, the guy who kind of founded FindingFive and whose brainchild it is, very closely to work up specific features that we needed in the lab to make our studies possible. And since I've joined the team, I've been able to be a part of those efforts to deal directly with researchers who say, here's a kind of study that I want to do. I want to make it possible. Is there some way that you guys can help me do that? And we work on developing new features to fit our researcher users' needs. So the main thing that I can say about FindingFive that I think I just want to put out there up front is that we are by researchers and for researchers, and we really focused on that. You can see some different website links on the slides here. So our main website, findingfive.com, and some additional like documentation and tutorials and an email address for researcher help and support. We are very responsive to that email. Usually either Ting or myself is the one answering those. So hopefully later on in this tutorial, we'll be getting some time for you guys to actually try FindingFive out, for those of you who are interested. And after this is all over, this researcher help email would be a nice place to get in touch with us with any questions or if you need any help or support trying to figure things out. So a little bit about what FindingFive is that I want to say. I think the easiest way to characterize us is that we're just a way to present behavioral experiments to study participants, and that we do this through a completely web-based platform so that the same experiment can be run in the lab and online without you having to do any coding or change it in any way, which has in the past been a pretty powerful feature of FindingFive, although at the moment, maybe the in-person research is kind of not the point. But since we are run through the web, it makes that aspect of it very easy. Doing this without FindingFive or some kind of related platform, I should say. It sounds like PCIbex, we might be hearing about later, is another example of something to help with this. It would require you to essentially write like HTML and CSS and JavaScript code, right? And you would have to host all of this code on a server of some sort. And that's just, all of that are massive barriers to science, right? We're researchers, we're not website code junkies, really. So we try to handle that stuff for you guys so that you can really focus on designing the experiment, recruiting participants, and so on. Something I think my colleague, Patty Reeder, who is in this Zoom meeting with us and will be helping me out in this presentation, she is probably going to mention a little bit about this later, but we are working currently. As of right now, you can't pay participants directly through FindingFive. You kind of have to handle the payment yourself, or you have to go through Amazon Mechanical Turk, which we have integration for. And that's something also we'll talk about later. But we are currently working on building that support for direct payment. And especially in light of this sort of coronavirus quarantine stuff, we're making that even more of a priority, just to try to expand the ways in which you can reach participants and get data. Just a little bit kind of about how FindingFive works. Essentially, if you have some idea for a study, when you build it on the FindingFive platform, you write some code in a very simplified coding language that has a pretty low learning curve to it. The code itself is trying to be modeled off of like the actual design of behavioral experiments. So we use terms like, stimuli, responses, trial templates, blocks, procedure, etc. Just to try to kind of make this all more accessible and familiar to us all, right? And once you've coded it, you can launch a session of it to begin recruiting participants. And essentially you code the same experiment, and then you just select, I either want to launch this on the FindingFive platform, or I want to launch this through Mechanical Turk. And as long as you have your Amazon Web Services account all set up and ready to go, we essentially convert the study to the format it needs to be run on Mechanical Turk for you. So just real briefly, before I get into actually showing you guys FindingFive itself, I want to talk just a little bit about the experiment structure in FindingFive and just kind of highlight the parallels with a normal behavioral experiment. I mean, I don't have to explain to anyone here, I think, what a typical behavioral experiment might contain, but I just kind of want to highlight that the components of a study in FindingFive are meant to mirror them explicitly. One of the few differences you'll notice is that we have like a component in a FindingFive study that we call trial templates. And this is basically just for us to make it so that you don't have to code every single trial, hard code every trial individually. you make a template and say, I want these stimuli distributed with these responses to make trials in this block. And it's just kind of try to make it a little simpler and easier for our users. I think just to kind of cover sort of briefly those sorts of things that that are covered here, like stimuli that we have are just any stimuli you can present to participants. So what we refer to as stimuli can include things like text or audio files or images or videos, pretty much you name it. And responses are essentially any opportunities for data collection that we make possible. And these include things like, participants can do a free response in text or audio. So they can, as long as they give permissions for their browser to access their microphone, you can record audio from them. You can have them do free response text. We have choice responses that they can click or use key presses, rating scales, etc. And then our trial templates are, like I mentioned, just templates for how to pair responses and stimuli together. And then we have a procedure section, which is what you might imagine. We essentially say, which trial templates do you want to put into which blocks, and what order do you want to put those blocks in for your participants to see. So essentially, you're defining these different components, configuring them together, and that's really all there is to it. And this is obviously a comprehensive logic, and so some studies don't necessarily need like every component in the maximum complexity, but we sort of compel you to use it anyway so that all the studies have the same underlying fundamental logic. So what I want to do right now is just demonstrate, we have some demos that I want to show with a couple features. Let me see if I stop that share and change to Google Chrome. Okay, sorry, my Zoom thing is in the way. How do I change tabs? There we go. Okay, so this is our website, our landing page. And as you can see, one of our big focuses is to try and make the entire experiment process something that you can handle directly just on our platform. There are a lot of alternatives out there where you might, like DIY alternatives, for example, where you can maybe code your study in one place, recruit participants somewhere else and kind of run it over there. And we try to make it all sort of more of an all-in-one experience. And I encourage you guys to kind of visit the website and take a look and poke around. I think we made a special case. So we are typically by invite only so that we can kind of control who's coming in and starting to use our product. Not that we want to limit it from anyone, but we do things like we manually verify that you are actually a legitimate researcher from a legitimate institution, for example. Right now, I think we've kind of waived the invitation code portion. So I think if you guys try to sign up, you should be able to make an account and get into FindingFive. You won't be able to launch a study on the platform or through Mechanical Turk until we do verify your researcher status, which we have to do manually. So that will happen later. But just kind of a heads up there. Wow, I guess maybe Zoom's slowing down my internet. Or maybe it's because we're all rushing in to sign up. Maybe that's why.
It could be that. I know there's some weird things sometimes with Zoom and interactions with web browsers or stuff like that. So hopefully it's just the internet.
Yeah. Well, also my personal internet's probably not the greatest here at my house, so. Okay, so right now I'm signed into a sort of administrative account that we have, research at FindingFive. But you can just sort of see all researchers on FindingFive are also considered participants. So what you're seeing right now is sort of a landing page that a participant might see if they come to FindingFive. And there are some studies that are being offered for credit at the University of Arizona that are kind of dominating the main thread here. But as you can see, there are some other ones from other researchers that we can see. And it looks like not that many are active right now. But in our research page, just to kind of show you guys the demos, right? This is where you would see any studies that you've made. Through our interface, you can see like we have a button to create a new study. When you actually create a study, I'm going to do this tokenized text tutorial for researchers. This is sort of what the materials look like that you actually code up. So you can see we have organization of trial templates and procedure, and there's kind of a tab to go back and forth to the different interfaces to work on that. And over on the right side of the screen, we have a list of our stimuli, which is searchable. You can add new ones manually, where you give them a name and you define some attributes of that stimulus, like what kind of stimulus it is and what its content is. And you can also say, just define a whole bunch of stimuli in a CSV file and just upload them directly, which makes it really convenient to do lots of stimuli all at once. And of course, you can sort of download and export your stimulus definitions that you have for purposes, say, of sharing your materials with another researcher, for instance. And we also have responses as another thing, and it's the same sort of kind of interface that we have here for that. So what I want to do is I want to actually show you the preview. So when you're working on a study in FindingFive, at any point, provided that your code can compile correctly, you can preview that study. And so we'll get a look at what this particular demo tutorial is about, and that's the tokenized text stimulus, which is a special kind of stimulus that we created to facilitate like self-paced reading, for example, and other studies of that kind of nature. So in this particular case, since this has a self-paced reading component, there's keyboard interactions. And a lot of people don't know this, but Apple's Safari web browser will not let you do that in full screen mode. So we have this nice little warning about that, but that's all this is saying. Just a heads up that if you happen to be somebody who knows that your participants like to use Safari for some reason, this is something to be aware of. Another thing that we can point out, we always have a landing page here with some instructions, sort of general FindingFive-wide instructions for participants when they take a study. And for example, we require that you have a consent form in order to be able to run a study, and it's sort of up to the participant to actually read it, of course. And they have to actually give their consent to begin the study. This, of course, is a preview, and so it's not really a real study, but it kind of gives you a sense of what would be happening. So just to kind of demonstrate this particular stimulus type, since this is just one of the many kinds of stimuli that we have, this little tutorial will help us explore a variety of ways to create engaging studies with this tokenized text stimulus. So as you can see here, a tokenized text stimulus is just a string of text that is broken up into tokens. In this case, it's designed to present text content in an incremental manner with or without interactions from participants. So in this case, it didn't require any interaction from me. This was automatically set, right? And then I don't know, I think that was pretty clear. I'm biased, but so when we have this sort of automatic presentation, obviously we allow you to adjust the speed of the stimulus, right? So we have a case with a slower speed and a case with a faster speed to kind of show you what that looks like. But we also have different presentation modes, right? So the plain mode just kind of presents the text on the screen as you've just seen. The masked mode actually can do like masking of the actual tokens as they appear. In this case, we have a backwards mask, so they're all hidden after they're displayed. Looks like we have, are there chat questions? No, okay. Yeah, I'm trying to monitor the chat, but I might not do the best job. Okay, yeah, and so we also, in addition to masking, we also have like singleton displays where it's one word at a time and everything else is hidden. So then, of course, we don't have to display these automatically. So in this case, this is self-paced. So I'm going to pace it myself. FindingFive takes care of the nitty-gritty details so that you can focus on research. So reaction times for that whole process are recorded for you automatically. So you can implement a sort of self-paced reading of tokenized text stimuli under any of the presentation modes, plain, masked, or singleton, depending on your study needs. And these are just sort of some of the core functions of the tokenized text stimulus. We obviously, we have more that it can do. And so you can go to help.findingfive.com to look at our API documentation, and specifically our study specification grammar reference there, where we talk about how to define different types of stimuli and what they can do. Okay, I'm gonna skip this part since I don't really need to, yeah, maybe, since I don't really need to give myself feedback. Okay, so just kind of as a brief little interview, just to give you the basics. We have, for example, what we saw was essentially two procedural blocks that were defined in here to consist of various trial templates. We have things like cover trials for instructions prior to trial templates themselves, end trials to come at the end of a block. And in this case, it was pretty simple because this is just a demo and a tutorial. But there are a lot of different things you can do in the procedure with, say, ordering the trial templates, and you can order stimuli and responses within the trial templates as well. What I would like to do now is, I think I'm going to hand over the presentation to my colleague, to Patricia Reeder. And William, if you can unmute her, and Patty, are you ready to do a demo for the audio?
Yes, I am. Before we do that, do we want to answer some of the questions in the chat?
Yeah, if we have questions to answer, I would love to.
Great. Hi, everybody.
Yes, so there are a number of questions that we saw. I think one of the first ones that occurred to me was about precision, timing precision. So this one question says, what level of precision do you have for reaction time responses compared to, for example, Psycho.js, etc.? Since for many studies, a lag of several milliseconds could be too much.
Yeah, so we are, our sensitivity is on the order of magnitudes of milliseconds. The reaction times are being recorded directly by JavaScript, so we would have, the same temporal sensitivity as other JavaScript. It's really, I mean, in theory, it's so tiny to not affect this kind of research and the kind of data. The real issue would be like if there are network issues, which is something that just can't be controlled when you want to conduct a study over the web. We actually have someone who is, I believe, who is planning on trying out some auditory masked priming on our platform. And so we're actually very interested in how that goes to kind of see, because usually their effect sizes are in the order of magnitude of milliseconds, just to kind of verify, like, does this work? We think it's viable. We think we can do that. We think our timing measures are sensitive enough for that. But they haven't done that study yet, so.
That's great. Okay, another question is FindingFive open to entering into third-party data processing agreements with universities? And one person said they asked this because their institution, the Arctic University in Norway, requires this for GDPR reasons.
I think we would be open to it. We would have to discuss specifics, obviously. That's not something that we've done yet, but I don't see why we wouldn't be open to such a thing.
Okay. Another question, is pseudo-randomization of stimuli available, for instance, Latin square structure? And then they mentioned that this thing seems amazing. Jim?
No, thanks. So we are sort of, our view is we don't really feel like we need to by just automatically do a Latin square for you. I think most researchers are pretty capable of designing such a thing. And pseudo randomization can be a little tricky to automate. There are some things that some features that we make available. So just to kind of give a sense, I mean, true randomization is easy. We do that quite well. But we do have, let me see, I think it's in the trial templates. I'm showing help documentation right now, by the way. Stimulus patterns. So we do have like a pseudo-random stimulus pattern that does random reordering of stimulus presentation, but subject to certain constraints, right? So you can define attributes to apply constraints and say, you know, I want at least this many of a certain attribute in a row, but at most this many, and we'll do randomization within those constraints. Does that answer the question, I hope?
I think we'll find out. If you have that question, feel free to follow up on the Google Doc. So one person asked if it's free, and Shiloh has been doing a great job, as well as Patty, of answering on the Google Doc. So thank you guys so much for doing that online. But it looks like the question was answered that it is free. Is that correct?
Yeah, so wow, I should have mentioned that, huh? Yeah, FindingFive is free, and that's one of the, I mean, there are definitely other platforms out there that do much of what we do, but you typically have to pay for them. Ours is free. We do have to kind of, since this is entirely run by volunteer operation, just to kind of help us with server costs and stuff like that, we do have premium plans available with some perks, but all the core functionality and everything you need to get started is totally free.
And just to jump in, on the Google Doc, I listed the webpage where you can learn about the differences between membership tiers. So basic use is everything you could possibly want to do on FindingFive, basically. Premium membership will just bump up that ability a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. Okay, so let's see. How much customizability is there in the various presentation modes? For example, underlining words, different fonts, bolding, etc., or non-Latin scripts?
Yeah, so really, let me show you what a tokenized text stimulus actually looks like. So in here we have this long, well, not that long, but somewhat long definition. So you can see we have like a definition of what the character is that we're using to mask. In this case, it's being forward masked and backward masked. We have it set to being self-paced. The content is the actual string of text itself. And by default, whatever you put in here, so you can put any UTF-8 viable stuff into here. And by default, it splits based on spaces, but you can specify other characters, for example, if you want. You can actually use a regular expression to break up the text as well. That's another feature that we allow for. I don't know. And then basically we have parameters for things like the size of the font. You can, I believe, actually, I've never, now that I think about it, I'm really glad somebody asked this. I've never tried messing with the font itself, but we are essentially accessing the CSS based on properties that you give. So it looks like color, yes, and size by default. I don't know about font, but that would be something that would be pretty easy for us to help implement something for. I think what you could do at the very least, because this should work, is we take HTML tags, so you should be able to do things like span style equals and define CSS style, right? For anyone who knows anything about each HTML, right? That kind of thing. Well, I guess it would have to be like this. right? And you could put style specifications in there. But you might have to learn a little bit of HTML to make that work. Otherwise, this would be the kind of thing if you needed a specific font and we didn't have a way for you to do that, you'd reach out to us and we would be happy to implement something like that. That's definitely generalizable and usable for a lot of people.
Right. So I think that's one thing you wanted to underscore is the responsivity of your team to, if there's something that's built in that they want, that's not there that they want, then they can reach out to you, and then you guys are flexible and responsive and trying to adapt.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, FindingFive is as good as it is right now because people have used it and made suggestions. And so we are very on board with that approach to continuing to improve it.
That's fantastic. And I'm sure you're going to be inundated in the next few weeks and months, with all of a sudden all the people in the world doing eye tracking or self-paced reading are just going to all of a sudden be on FindingFive. But that's a different problem. Okay.
Yep.
So one person had asked before about the turnaround. I think that Shiloh had responded to that, like how quickly, when people are asking questions or asking for changes, how quickly do you get back? What's that kind of time frame?
Yeah, sorry, I should probably be trying to glance at this document too. I'm not sure what Shiloh said, but we try to be really fast. I mean, usually, so, Ting and I, for example, when someone sends an email to researchhelp@findingfive.com, it goes directly to our phones, and one of us will usually answer within 24 hours with at least a preliminary response. Sometimes our response might be, oh, this sounds like you are going to need a new feature. We're having a meeting tomorrow. Let us talk about it and we'll get back to you. But we usually at least let you know that we're paying attention and that we care about your issue as fast as we can.
Right. Much better than Verizon when you call for.
I hope so.
So someone asked a specific question about the variability in RTs. Like, what is the variability in the reaction times that you collect?
Variability, I mean, that would depend on the study, or am I misunderstanding what they mean by variability?
Well, you're saying it really shouldn't be different from doing any sort of experiment. If you ignore the effective lag or connection strength, then so variability should be approximately the same as
other JavaScript, right? So other online mechanisms, which I don't know. Sort of Ting would be more familiar with those kinds of details. I know that in sort of my field as a linguist and people I had worked with, that I had kind of learned that you always want to use a button box rather than a keyboard because keyboards aren't as responsive and things like that. But having talked to Ting about this, apparently a lot of those studies were done with much older keyboards, and keyboards have improved a lot. So he's pretty sure that the difference is very small. I couldn't give you a number though. He's way more knowledgeable about that kind of stuff than I am. So if that's a question that's important to you, I encourage you to send an email to us either at the researcher help email or at feedback@findingfive.com. And I'm sure Ting would be more than happy to answer you.
That's great. We could have a ton of questions. So there's definitely more for me to ask. I don't know if you wanted to come back to questions or just keep going.
Let's come back to it. So we have 2 other demos that we want to show. So I think there's always a chance that some of these questions will be kind of implicitly answered through the process of going through those demos. So why don't we hand it over to Patty, if that's
great. Yeah. So I just want to let everyone know that's listening. Your questions, keep adding them to the Google Doc. We're going to try to answer every question during the live chat here, but even if we don't get to it, we're going to make sure that we get some responses into the Google Doc from the team from FindingFive. So, your questions will be answered regardless of whether we get to them during the live session here. Okay, so anyways, take it away, guys.
Right. So the purpose of us going through these demos is to show you some of the stimuli and response types that we think might be most useful for this audience. So Noah just showed you tokenized text. I'm going to try to share my screen as well. Somebody in the Google chat just asked about recording of participant voice or other kinds of audio, and we can do that. So let me just share my screen here. All right. Okay, so what I'm showing you right now, whoops, sorry. Earlier, Noah was showing you our API, our study specification grammar reference, and our help documents. And we do have a ton of different types of stimuli and response types. So one of the response types is audio. In the demo I'm going to be showing you, it's incredibly simple. We'll just be recording a participant's audio response to a query on the screen. So you can see here, this is the researcher panel that Noah was showing you earlier. We, again, have a very simple procedure with just one block. Our trials, I think there's only going to be 2. So it's a fixed order of trials. And in our trial template, we are setting up some instructions for the participant, and then just 2 basic ways of recording audio stimuli. So let's dive in to previewing the study. So I'm actually go back to Zoom. Okay. So now you should be seeing what this will look like for a participant. Again, just like Noah said, there will be a consent form here. It's up to the participant to read the consent form, and we'll go ahead and participate. Okay, I agree to the terms. I'm going to begin my study. Okay, thank you for checking out this demo study on the audio recording feature. Recording participants on FindingFive can be achieved by using this audio response type. Once FindingFive detects the presence of an audio response in a study, it will attempt to request microphone permission from participants before the study starts. If FindingFive detects no audio recording equipment on a participant's computer, it will prevent the participant from starting the study at all. So here we go. The audio response creates a simple recording interface. Participants can control it on their own. So it allows participants to record themselves, review the recording, and confirm if they're satisfied with it. So I'm going to go ahead and record my speech right now. You can see the volume bar is moving in accordance with the volume of my voice. And I'll say I'm done with this trial as the participant. Now I can listen to what I just recorded. I'm not exactly sure if through Zoom you're going to be able to hear this, but let's give it a shot.
Yeah, I don't think we can hear that.
You can't? Okay, sorry. I was listening to my voice speak.
Does it sound wonderful?
It sounds strange, as listening to one's own voice can be.
Quality, right, is good quality.
The quality is fantastic, yes. Yeah. All right. Another feature of the audio recording, which can be particularly helpful, is changing the padding on the recording. So you might have a participant click the record button and then hit the stop button, but they're continuing to speak. So if you anticipate that this could potentially be an issue, you might want to build in some padding on this response type. So for example, in this particular trial, we're going to be recording my voice here for a couple of seconds. I, the participant, am going to hit stop, but in fact, the recording is continuing for an additional 200 milliseconds, 500 milliseconds, whatever you want it to be. So the audio file that you will get when you collect your data is actually going to be slightly longer than what the participant marked by hitting the stop button. So audio responses recorded in stereo, compressed at a bit rate of 64K. The fidelity is good enough for human speech. Each file that you will receive is an OGG file, similar to MP3. You should be able to convert this if you need to using any number of free tools or open it up in a tool like Audacity. And again, our API has a lot of details on this. All right. So Let me go back over here. All right, Noah, would you like to come back at this point in time? Can we unmute Noah?
Okay,
there we go. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have anything you'd like to add? I guess I can really quick just highlight that when you look at the API, let me share this here. When you look at the API for audio responses, you can see one of the things you can change here is the padding on it. Again, the default is 500 milliseconds. After the participants hit stop, it will continue to record. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would add, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, we put a implicit upper limit on the padding because
we don't want hours long.
If you had a typo where you put in a really large padding, you would essentially be recording somebody without their consent, really, because they would think that they were no longer being recorded when they were. So we did put an upper limit on that. I think I can't remember what it is, but that's implicit. But 500 is usually, in our experience, is a good number. We realized there were a lot of issues with the data where it was getting cut off. That a lot of researchers were happening, and once we put that in and suggested, we kind of played with the number and suggested that number, those problems basically went away. So.
And just to show how simple this is, when you build an audio response, all you need to do is create a new response type here in the researcher screen, set it to type audio, incredibly simple. If you want to add padding, that's an optional setting that you can have in your response type.
Yeah.
Okay, do we want to answer more questions, go on to the third demo?
Maybe we should do some questions about audio specifically. Would that be appropriate? Okay, so there was some questions of whether you can record voices. So we just established that, yes, that works great. Let's see, I'm trying to find, could you describe how voice responses work a bit more? Can you advance trials based on a voice response? Like have their voice trigger a trial to be advanced?
Oh, no, we cannot do that as of yet. Yeah. I'm trying to think whether there would be any technical issues with that. I mean, as long as it's done by they actually press the record button, right? So that we're actually recording them, I suppose it might be doable in theory, but there might be some kind of technical barriers there. One thing I do want to point out, just as a general bit of information for people who aren't used to collecting data over the web, the circumstances your participants are going to be in are not the ones you're used to in the lab. So that might be the kind of study design that is a little more difficult to do over the web. People, despite whatever instructions you might give, people will do these things in coffee shops sometimes.
Right. So on that point, a follow-up to that question was someone asking about 2 to 3-year-old participants. And I'm not sure exactly the question, but they were asking again about the possibility of advancing trials based on voice, but also is it possible to have general audio recordings? I'm assuming what the question was is like, can you record like throughout the experiment rather than having it be requiring a press to initiate recording?
So no, that's not something we can do right now. We can't just do a blanket recording throughout the whole thing. I'm trying to think, that might be the kind of feature, we could certainly talk about it, but it might be the kind of feature that we would be hesitant to make possible in the first place. There's just sort of some issues with how clear would it be to participants, the data itself and transmitting it over the servers. That could be a very big audio file. And depending on how many participants you're having in your study, that could cause some real server load issues that might affect your study. We certainly would be open to discussing feasibility and options for a particular study design or a particular goal of a researcher. But yeah, just my gut reaction is that there might be a little bit of pushback on our end. We would want to at least talk about other options.
Well, that I think raises an important question that maybe we should discuss and maybe allocate some time to. It's just, I think there's a lot of people that are not generally familiar, including myself, with online experiments, and just what are the things that, like, you're going to run into that may be even obvious, but you just, you have to sort of do it to understand, like the fact, like you mentioned, about the controlled setting, other kinds of issues that might pop up. So maybe, I don't know if you guys think about it, be maybe like, 10 or 15 minutes just at the end to discuss that specifically.
I think that's a great way to do it. Yeah.
And I think on that point as well, I think a lot of people probably don't know about Mechanical Turk and payment and that sort of thing. So maybe that would be good to include in that as well. This is
I think we'll fold those discussions together at the end, I think.
Okay, yeah, that's great. Okay. Let me see. Someone, so I've got 3+1s on the question. You mentioned a beta online eye tracking system. Is it possible to integrate other web-based data collection with the experiment in FindingFive? Oh, so I think that may be referring to the fact that PCIbex has a beta online eye tracking system. And I know I had asked you this question as well before, and you said that you don't currently have online web-based eye tracking, right?
Yeah, we don't currently have it, and we don't have any plans to do it in the immediate future. We're just a little uncertain about the general reliability and generalizability of such a paradigm through the webcam. But I mean, it sounds like if PCIbex is doing it, we would be, of course, very interested in learning more about how that is going for them, because if they're getting, reliable enough data for people to do visual world paradigm research, then that could be something useful for us as well.
Right, and visual world paradigm, is much less, requires much less precision, I think, rather than reading experiments or other kind of visual psychophysics.
Right, yeah, certainly.
Okay, so another question was, can participants see a visual stimulus and record their voice at the same time, like in a picture naming experiment?
Yeah.
Yes.
And is it possible to measure latency, response latency from stimulus onset to voice onset?
Yes. So, well, a little bit of that calculation would have to be your own. So what we can measure is the amount of time until they press the record button. And then, so what might be more challenging is trying to have them open the recording and then see the image, and you measure that time. But I think we can do that. We have a property we call barrier that allows us to define whether certain stimuli block other stimuli or responses in the same trial from appearing yet. So for example, it's very useful when you have a video and you want someone to watch the whole video before they respond, right? You make that video a barrier to the responses. If you take that property away, you could, in theory, they could press record at any time. You could have some delay on your image stimulus. You know what the delay is, and that measurement is very precise. And then all you have to do is measure the time within the audio recording before they started actually speaking. Of course, it's up to you if you wanted to actually do voice onset or the click of the record button, because that click might better represent when they're ready to speak.
Well, that's a great thing you mentioned, right? Actually using the click sound. Is there a way to, just incorporate in the experiment, like a tone that would play or something like that would be useful for that?
Oh, that's entirely up to you. If you make an audio stimulus that has a tone in it, you should be able to have that audio stimulus triggered when they press click, for example. But since each recording that they're taking is isolated, usually the tone thing is done for purposes of kind of helping the researcher separate out, okay, this is the stretch of time that I'm interested in. For us, your users are usually going to be clicking record and stop. So that gives you a start and an end time to be interested in. But yeah, I mean, certainly if you set up your own audio stimulus, you could do the sort of beep paradigm.
Cool. So someone asked the question, is it possible to take an already programmed experiment outside of FindingFive via JavaScript, HTML, or CSS, and to use FindingFive to serve for the implementation of the experiment and handling data storage and stuff?
We don't have such a thing currently in place, no. That's That's an interesting question, though. I mean, depending on the format of it, it might not be that much work to translate it into FindingFive, but I mean, probably that would be something we would ask the researcher to do, though. So,
right. Yeah. Okay, another question. Is there a way to interact with stimuli on the screen, like clicking on images to play different sounds and such? Okay.
Yes.
So that's a yes for those that are listening only. Let's see. I'm not sure how much we should spam here. You can present audio files as stimuli. We clarified that already. You can do self-paced audio moving window presentation.
Oh, no.
No.
But that's very interesting.
That sounds like a cool feature.
Get in touch with us. I want to talk more about it.
Whoever asked the question about self-paced audio moving window presentation, email these guys and they will do their best, I assume, to try to implement that. And it's not too much of a technical burden, right, to figure that out.
Well, that's something I wouldn't want to comment on until I talk to Ting.
Okay.
He's the technical guru on the team.
Right, all right. If someone's a really good programmer, you can join FindingFive and help them add features to their platform.
Yeah, we'll definitely plug ourselves that way. We want more help.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're going to need the help in the upcoming months here. Okay, maybe we should move on. There's some more questions, but I think they're less specific to this kind of stuff. If you have another demo or more material to cover here.
Okay. All right. So let me share my screen again. What do we got here? Oh, by the way, since I accidentally clicked on the wrong window. So this is news.findingfive.com, and just I'll briefly say, so we have like blog posts with news about our community. We have a mission statement here, which sort of tells you a bit about what we're all about, and I encourage you guys to take a look at that at some point. And we also have here, as part of our blog, we have some tutorials. Like, for example, we have a tutorial on automatic creation of compensation hits for Mechanical Turk workers. So that's something we can talk about later when we get into Mechanical Turk, but this is just an example of a tutorial that we have. So just since I was on this page, I'll take this opportunity to share that. Okay, so.
If I could actually just jump in for a second while you're pulling that up, sure. Noah. We have a crash course on that news.findingfive.com, which walks through building a simple memory-based study. And yeah, actually, if you go to researcher resources, yep, exactly. This crash course is pretty straightforward and would walk you through step-by-step all of the programming concepts. There are very few that you would need to go through in order to build just your very first simplistic study on FindingFive. So that would be a really good resource just to get started.
This is a little outdated. This is our old interface, actually.
This is our old interface before it got prettier. But the information is all the same. It just looks a smidgen different, and we'll be updating those screenshots very soon.
A quick question for you. Is it possible for people to try to do that now and then get feedback from you?
Sure.
Yeah, so I think that should work. You should, I mean, if you were, by the way, if anyone's trying to sign up and encountering problems, let us know.
Right, if you're trying to sign up or getting problems, let them know. And if you're able to get into their system, you can try messing around with this and trying the tutorial. And then if you have questions in real time while you're working on it, we can get those questions to Noah and Patty. And also, we can also potentially set up some video chats if you need help to walk through getting started. Anyways, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, so Noah's going to show us a slightly more complicated use of the FindingFive grammar.
Yeah, and sorry, I'm plugging my computer in because I realized I didn't do that. Okay. So what I'm going to demonstrate now is conditional branching, which if that's not a term that you're familiar with, well, I guess I'll let the demo get it started for you. So conditional branching is essentially assigning participants into different arms or branches of a study based on some test condition. And usually this means like based on a particular response they gave, or based on whether they pass an accuracy threshold in a training block or something like that. So essentially what it is kind of defining different versions of your experiment that are conditional on participants' experience or performance. So what this amounts to is essentially changing the trials that a participant experiences based on their responses to previous trials. And we have two methods of conditional branching sort of in the broader sense that we have support for at the moment. We have a match method and an accuracy method. And these are the methods used to evaluate the condition upon which participants will be sorted. So using the match method, different response options are matched with different branches of the experiment. So we're going to try it with an alternative forced choice trial. So basically, this is just a total toy example, obviously. But depending on whether I choose the left button or the right button, I'm going to get a different version of this experiment. So if I press left, it actually tells me, well, you clicked on the left button, so you're seeing this. Obviously, if I had picked right, it would be a different trial, right? And so this is the essence of conditional branching and how it works. This same match method can also be applied to, for example, our rating response. So here, participants are sorted into one branch if they select either 1 or 2, a different branch if they select 3, or a different branch if they select either 4 or 5. So you can see how this might be useful under, say, survey conditions, for example. So I don't know, I'll pick 2. And if you notice up here, it said branched into branch A at the top of my screen. I don't know if you missed it, it was there shortly. I'm currently in preview mode. So I just want to highlight this preview mode is for the benefit of the researcher testing their code. Participants would not see that, right? They're not going to be told that they were put into a particular branch. But in this case, I defined something that I called branch A, and that was contingent on that response. So here, since I picked a value of 1 or 2, this is the message I'm getting. We also have the accuracy method, of course, and when we use the accuracy method, participants are sorted into their branches based on whether they pass some accuracy threshold. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have 5 AFC trials in a row and an accuracy threshold of 80%, right? So I have to get 4 to 5. So in this case, for the purposes of the demonstration, I'm telling you explicitly what the correct answer is, right? But as you can see, if I say choose the wrong answer twice, I'm not going to pass that threshold. So I did not get 4 out of 5. I failed to pass the accuracy threshold. If I had, I'd be getting a different branch of the experiment. Now, one way we can use this, that's not actually in the demo at the moment. I created this demo on short notice, so I didn't have time to do this. But one thing you can do, one thing that's really useful for training in an experiment, is you can set it up so that if somebody doesn't pass the accuracy threshold, they essentially just take the same block again. They go through, or the same series of blocks again, for example. So they just go through the training again, they do the test again, and you can evaluate them, for example, based on their overall performance across all their efforts or just on their last effort. You can set a number of iterations for how many times they can try to do the training and the test and so on. So that's, oh, I probably shouldn't have done that. So that's conditional branching. I think maybe before we turn to questions, well, actually, let's turn to questions first in case I'm sure people are interested in this. And we'll turn to questions first, and then I'll show the, I'll show some results files after that.
Okay, so let me see if I can find any questions, particularly about the branching. I don't know if I see any. If somebody can find those questions on the Google Doc, I'm trying to see.
So, I mean, it may have just been too quick. But I mean, I think this is a pretty powerful feature. I think it took us a while to develop, but we were pretty excited when we got it working. just why don't actually, what I should do is show you kind of how it sort of works in our procedure, so you can see that it's not terribly complicated. So this particular design that I did here has a lot of blocks because conditional branching in FindingFive happens exclusively at the block level. We did this just sort of because we were looking at, for example, Qualtrics has a bunch of different kinds of conditional branching. One's based on an individual response that happens at a trial level where, you know, the test condition is a trial and the branching outcomes are single trials. And then separately, they have something else that's more of like a group of trial level, something else that's more of a block level, and so on. And we just thought, you know, it's not that much work to take all of this stuff and just do it only at the block level. And it's actually easier, I think, for the researchers this way, because when I was trying to learn how to do this in Qualtrics, it got very confusing very fast. So to give you a sense, the first evaluation condition that we had was a matching using the matching method to evaluate the condition on an AFC trial. So I essentially just made a block with my trial template consisting of my AFC trial in it. And what we do is we just define this branching dictionary here. And that's what tells FindingFive that this block of trials is to be treated as a condition for conditional branching. I set the method to match. I set some triggers, like which trials within this block we want to actually use to trigger the conditional branching. In this case, there was only one trial, so that was quite simple. And you can even say, you know, I want all the trials in this trial template, but only the ones that have a certain response in them, right? So that can be something that you can do to have rather complex trials where you actually evaluate your conditional based on just one of many responses that participants give. And then we just define the actual branches themselves, which are then specified in the actual block sequence of the experiment. So in this case, this is that block that evaluates the condition. When participants complete that block, FindingFive knows what their responses were and what branch to assign them to. And then we have this dictionary here that defines those branches. And as long as the names of these branches match the names that I gave in my branching dictionary, then FindingFive can handle it and we get conditional branching. And so in this case, they see different blocks depending on which response they gave. You can see the same thing for the rating block. We have the same kind of strategy, branch A, branch B, and branch 3. And also for the accuracy block, right, where I made blocks that I called, or branches that I called pass and fail, right, which I can just kind of show you what that looks like, right? So in the accuracy condition, it's the same basic structure as the other block, except in my branching dictionary here, my method is accuracy. I have a minimum score that people have to reach. In this case, it was 80%, so the 0.8. Define triggers in exactly the same way. And in the case of an accuracy block, you evaluate your branches based on a true or false condition. Did they pass this threshold?
So this is like a really complex choose your own adventure situation experience for your subject.
Yeah, although they don't know that they're choosing their own adventure in most cases. You obviously, whether you want to alert them to that fact is up to you as the researcher, but in most conditions, they wouldn't know. Yeah.
Okay, should we do some more questions here? I don't know. Okay, yes. So someone asked, would you use conditional branching to pseudo-randomly send participants to the lists or versions of the experiment in a between subjects design?
No. So we have a different feature called participant grouping, where basically we will automatically group participants into different lists. Conditional branching is going to always be conditional on the specific response. So it's dynamic from within the experiment. Whereas assigning participants to different groups is something you want to do up front before the experiment begins, right? So as soon as somebody joins the study, you want to assign them to one of those lists, right? And that's done through participant grouping, which actually looks very similar. So I don't have to do any kind of special blocks or anything, but I can just define, you know, I don't know, group 1, and they get this list of blocks, and group 2 gets some different list of blocks, and that would be how I could just automatically assign participants to different groups. What FindingFive will do in this case behind the scenes is the first participant who joins the study will get assigned to one of these groups randomly, and then the next participant will get assigned to the other group, and so on. That's not something I made a demo for or anything, but it's pretty straightforward, I think.
Cool. I think we have some other questions about other aspects of FindingFive. I don't know if you want to answer those now or wait.
I don't know, Patty, do you have any thoughts?
I guess, would it be worthwhile? We have Shiloh Drake also here, who has conducted research using FindingFive. I thought she could talk a little bit about what the results look like, how simple it is to actually look at your data, which is why we're going through all of this in the first place.
Right. Actually, I think that would be wonderful because there are some questions about data storage and access and things like that. So maybe that would be perfect to address those questions as well.
Shiloh, are you ready?
Okay, let me see if I can unmute her. I will unmute Shiloh if she's ready. I know Shiloh, among others, have been very helpful in editing the Google Doc online and formatting it nicely and adding the responses to the questions and things like that. So thank you, Shiloh, so much for that as well.
No problem. So let's see. I've been answering questions on the Google Doc, by the way, as just someone who's like used FindingFive, and I'm not affiliated with the team in any way, just so you all know. So I guess my role right now is to show you what the results end up looking like. So I'll just pull up a CSV file that that one of my latest studies from FindingFive generated. Okay. So you should be able to see my Excel file on the screen right now. And what this has, it's a CSV file before anything else, before I did any of the like cleaning of the response or of the file. So it's got everything from like the idea of the experiment over on the far left column to whether, let's see, this is whether I wanted them to use, or the type of response that they're giving. So in this case, I'm only using key presses. This is a reaction time experiment, so FindingFive recorded their response reaction time, and this is in milliseconds. And they also, you can also see that this is the trial template. Which trial are these in? Let's see. Are there any questions on the Google Doc for what? For like what?
Sorry, go ahead.
Are there any questions for like what else?
Well, I had a lot of interest in what the data file output looks like, which you're showing now, which is great.
Okay.
And we should say that data is sent to you as a CSV.
Yes.
Audio responses, like we said earlier, are OGG files. But this is exactly what you'll receive pretty much.
Yeah.
All right. That's great.
So it is convenient that it comes as a CSV if you're going to be importing it into R, for example.
Right, into R, or just manually examining it in Excel, which is great. There was a question about data storage. So in which country are the servers storing the data located? And if there are multiple, can we choose them? And this is because some European ethical privacy regulations could be a concern there.
Noah, would you like to speak to that?
Okay, can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes.
I think it's set so that I can only unmute you. So
Okay.
yeah, sorry about that.
So I will no longer mute myself when other people are talking. I'll just be quiet. Okay, yes, so we have servers on the East Coast and the West Coast of the United States. We do not currently have any server locations in Europe. This has been brought to our attention before, but we had like one single lab that had any interest for which this was an issue. And so it wasn't really, we pay for, or Ting pays for these servers out of pocket basically, unless we get donations. So that unfortunately is a restriction we have at the moment. Although we are currently in a stage of expansion and we're trying to get more people involved. And so if this platform seems like something that you want to use and you're willing to donate a little bit of money to help us with server costs, that would certainly facilitate us opening servers in Europe to expand into that market.
Okay. Because I think another question was just in reference to our IRBs. So it might be useful to include some links in the other document to publications, perhaps, using FindingFive that maybe people can look to how to navigate the IRB there. But as a quick question, I guess maybe this is good for Shiloh. What was the situation for navigating IRB using FindingFive?
This is for, when did I run this study? This was, this was run while I was a visiting researcher shortly after I got my PhD at the University of Arizona. And there, the linguistics department had an in-house IRB. And as someone else mentioned on the Google Doc, this is also the university from which Ken Forrester DMaster DMDX came from as well. So we're used to running a lot of online and remote data collection studies. So I think our IRB was like, they said, okay, yeah, this is just another remote experiment. And because all the participant IDs, and I'll expand this column, participant IDs look like absolute gibberish. And so like the confidentiality of their responses is masked by that. And you can really only find who's done the survey by or who's done the study, sorry, by looking at, or I think you have to have an option to collect the emails of someone or the names of someone, but they're not associated with individual responses, which usually has satisfied IRBs in my experience.
That's correct, yeah. So yeah, usually since we automatically generate participant IDs, from the researcher's point of view, it's totally anonymized unless they ask for emails because they need to do compensation or study credit or something like that. But I understand there's a concern about, we have that information on the back end, but I mean, we use a third-party resource who are quite secure. Their servers are very secure because it's a Cloudflare, and they handle a lot of server storage for a lot of big companies. So in our experience, my experience, I mean at the U of A, I should say, and helping other people do studies with FindingFive, I haven't known of anyone who has had an issue, but like Shiloh mentioned, we have an in-house IRB, and they are, they're sort of aware of the fact that the actual personal sensitivity in a lot of this data is limited, and the servers are secure enough to satisfy them.
I should mention that, we're kind of in uncharted territory now with this pandemic, and more researchers are probably going to be conducting online research at universities and in labs where that hasn't been done before. So I imagine that, the FindingFive team would be willing to help if your IRB is having difficulty understanding what online research is all about, or needs more detail about our security features.
Right, and I'll point out that before FindingFive, there's been plenty of online research using Mechanical Turk and other platforms. Yes. So there are plenty of publications and precedents if you're worried about those issues. Then that's, well, one question with the +1 is, how do you export the results? I'm not sure if you quite illustrated that. Is that automatic?
Yeah, so one thing we haven't talked about, so when you do a preview of a study, you download your previews results right away. But that's just for kind of the researcher, you know, testing out and piloting for themselves. When you do an actual study, you run what we call a session of that study. So you code up your study, you decide you want to run a session. You can do it on FindingFive or Mechanical Turk. You say how many participants you want to recruit, etc. When that session is completed, you can download a single CSV like this one with, and that's why there's participant IDs, right? With all of the participants' data from that session. And essentially there's just a button that you click to download that data and it comes to you in this CSV format.
And I can stop the sharing of my screen with Excel and start it with, I've got Firefox on in the background with like where I can get you can get the CSV file. So here you can see that I ran 3 separate studies or 3 separate sessions of this study, and I'm looking at just the ones that are finished, right? So I get this button said batch download data. And if I click that button, it'll say, oh, yep, here you go. Here's your data in this nice CSV file in this like very large folder of downloads that I never clean out.
Yes, we all struggle with the cleaning out of
that.
Yeah. So and just to talk a little bit through what this screen is actually showing you, the researcher, over on the right-hand side, it says platforms. So that's going to tell you if you're on Turk or deploying the study through FindingFive in the lab. And participant statistics. So how full is the study? If you wanted 50 participants, are you done completing or collecting 50 participants worth of data? I'm sorry, William, go ahead.
No, that's perfect. So another question was, can FindingFive generate a link for a study so that we can post this link on any crowdsourcing website besides Mechanical Turk?
Yeah, so if you were to, say, try to send a link to your actual study, the person who were trying to look at that link would not be able to access it because you're the only person with read-write authority. So, but if they have a FindingFive account, you can add collaborators to a study. So you can see on Shiloh's screen on the left, there's a collaboration button or tab. And if you, actually Shiloh, if you can click on that, you can just see like she has some collaborators. Ting, I'm assuming, was added as a collaborator to help you troubleshoot something.
Yeah.
And Isa's an actual researcher collaborator. But you can add new collaborators who are part of FindingFive to a study. And then they have, and you can, affect whether or not they can edit the study, whether or not they can run sessions. And this will allow them to have access to everything. That's as much as we do right now. But we do have plans to, as you can see, there's also a findings tab. And right now that we don't have this set up. But this is something that's on our radar that we really want to do, to try to make this a place to facilitate replication of research and sharing of research, both within our platform and with other platforms such as GitHub or OSF.
So Noah, rather than, so we're talking about collaboration with other researchers, the question I think was also aimed at, could you use a link to the study on FindingFive to recruit participants elsewhere?
Oh, participation through a link is a feature that we have. Yeah, so you can say email the link to participants. They have to, if you're running the study through the FindingFive platform, they have to create a FindingFive account, a participant account, or if they want to, researchers can participate in studies as well. So they would have to sign up, but they can use use that link to participate in your study.
Right, it can't be embedded right now without either a Mechanical Turk worker account or a FindingFive participant account. But you
Right.
can definitely send the link to your study to whomever you want.
That's great. And then that's, I think another question was, can you redirect to a URL at the end of the experiment, like Qualtrics, because of subject credit compensation via like a subject pool?
Yes, you should be able to add a URL into the study. Whether we have it set up to make those clickable, I've never actually done this before personally, and I haven't actually thought about this, but I believe we can do that. At the very least, if we can't do that, at the very least, what we can do is you as a researcher can ask for participant emails, and when somebody completes a study, you can just send them that link through the email at the very least.
Is that what you've done in the past, Shiloh?
In the past, what have I done? In the past, I collected emails and set it up that way. I've also done, I'm trying to remember what we did here. I think this one was just for course credit. So they just sent me the email, and at the U of A had a system that collected all of the participants. And so I could just click off a box and say, yep, you participated, here's your course credit.
Mm.
And just to reiterate, that email is not attached to their data, so they
Right.
can maintain anonymity.
Right. Yeah, I have no idea whose data goes to whose responses, or whose email goes to whose data.
On one just clarification question. So is it the case that participants are required to have either a FindingFive account or Amazon MTurk account? Is that correct, or is it you must have a FindingFive account regardless?
Either.
Or,
So it's
yeah,
going to
for
depend
participants.
on the platform that you use to launch your session. If you do it through FindingFive, they have to have a FindingFive account. And by do it through FindingFive, I don't mean, you know, did you make this study in FindingFive? When you go to launch a session, you can say, I either want to use FindingFive itself to recruit participants, like, well, as the platform, not to recruit. You have to recruit them. But I either want to use FindingFive itself as the platform, or I want to launch it on Mechanical Turk. And if you do the Mechanical Turk option, they do not have to have a FindingFive account. They, in fact, your participants will probably have no idea that they're using FindingFive on any level.
Sorry, I'm trying to update the response in real time before I forget. Okay, so that's great. Thank you. And well, I think if I don't ask this question, I'm going to get some riots here. But in terms of, again, the question about eye tracking or webcam-based data collection, can you at least record webcam data, if not use online eye tracking?
No, we don't have any functionality built into our platform right now to access the webcam at all. I mean, that's something we could do, but we've just been hesitant to do it so far because I don't know, it gets a little hairy, and we just weren't sure that the data quality is good enough to be worth it at this point. But like I said, I mean, if others are doing it and their quality of data is sufficient for our typical researcher users, then we would definitely be interested in pursuing that.
Okay, and this is one question from me that I know other people will probably be interested in terms of video presentation, stimulus files that are videos.
Mm-hmm.
That's perfectly possible, or is it?
Yes, perfectly possible. Yeah, we recommend. Oh, this is something we can talk about. I mean, we're sort of running a little short, I think, on time. Is that right?
Well, yeah, we're slated to take a break at 12:15. We could probably go over a little bit. We've exhausted most of the questions, I believe, on the Google Doc, so that's good.
So I don't know if people are already doing this, but we could maybe turn to our discussion of like online study best practices and MTurk integration.
I think that's a fantastic idea. Yeah.
Yeah, because we could do that briefly and maybe have a little time at the end for people to play around with the platform.
Right, and people should feel free, I think, to play around with it, and we should be able to grab someone to help you afterwards, if possible, during the session. But yeah, I think that's a great idea to try to get through that.
Okay.
Sure. Okay. So just really quick, to answer questions about, you know, can you present video or can you collect auditory data from a participant, I just want to refer folks to our API, help.findingfive.com. You'll be able to see all the types of stimuli you can use, like text stimuli, images, playing audio clips to the participant, playing videos, and then tokenized text, what Noah showed earlier. And then in terms of responses, again, you can collect text box responses. You can do some of the types of responses that Noah was showing earlier, like a choice response, left, right, yes, no, a rating scale, 1 to 5, 1 to 10, or recording the participant's voice in audio response. So check those out to see some of the features. And as hopefully it's become clear, we're really excited to hear about new things that people want. So please tell us your ideas for new features, and we'll see what we can do. Okay. Noah, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I guess, you know, while we're talking about it, I'll just say, I think Patty is going to jump in and talk mostly about MTurk, but just because it's related to this, one thing that a lot of people who are new to online research don't really think about is sort of the size of your stimulus files and how many of them you have is going to affect the quality of the study, because each one of these files has to be loaded individually on the browser for each participant. So we absolutely can do videos. We recommend that if possible, they be compressed, right? Or that if they're not compressed, that you limit the numbers to some extent. We have some functionality built in to lessen these burdens. So for example, we can make it so that when participants are trying to take their study, FindingFive will only load, say, the first 2 blocks first, and then after those, they'll separately load the next 2 blocks to kind of prevent the browsers from holding on to too much data and having that slow down their experience. And these are things that are within the researcher's control. But it's just something I wanted to put out there while we're talking about stimuli, that we've had instances in the past, like we had somebody doing a phonetic study where they had, I think about 800 audio stimulus files that they were using for their phonetic perception study, and they were all uncompressed and they were all being loaded at once. And so they were very curious to find out why all the participants were reporting that their study was crashing. And so that's the kind of thing that I think a lot of researchers don't think about, because when you have people come into your lab, you know, that stuff's preloaded on your computer, and so there's no loading required. But online, every participant is essentially downloading those files when they take your study. So.
Right, that should be, of course, be great relevance to sign language research as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay, so I'm gonna kind of skip ahead here. If folks are interested in more information on just why you would want to use Mechanical Turk or the key terminology of it, using it, if you're really unfamiliar with it, please don't hesitate to reach out afterwards and we can go into more detail. But for now, I just want to share a little bit about some of the challenges of using Mechanical Turk. So as you may know, Mechanical Turk is a system that allows you to set up HITs, or human intelligence tasks, which are, for our intents and purposes, studies. You would be the requester, so you're the poster of a human intelligence task, and then you would be recruiting workers or people completing those HITs through Mechanical Turk. Amazon has some templates, but they're very, very simple. So they do offer internal, through Amazon's platform, kind of options for building a HIT, but they're really, really, really simple things. So you're not going to be designing an experiment using the pre-built templates on Amazon Mechanical Turk. You are going to want to do something external to Mechanical Turk. So building a study on a different server, and that's basically what FindingFive is here to do. So usually if you're going to be setting up a HIT on your own, you'll want to have a publicly accessible web server for hosting. You want to be programming in something like JavaScript. And you'll need to figure out a way to communicate with Amazon when a hit has been completed so that you can deal with compensation. And you also need to set up a secure place to store data. And as we've been talking about a couple times now, there's a number of in-lab technologies like eye tracking, obviously neuroimaging, that can be challenging, if not impossible, to implement over Mechanical Turk. So our goal at FindingFive is to really simplify the use of Mechanical Turk for data collection. Everything you do is in your browser. You do not need to set up any web server on your end. Essentially, FindingFive is a web app, so you don't need to call external libraries, you don't need to host on your own server, you don't need to deal with databases or set up a Python environment on your machine. You can think of FindingFive like an online research suite tool, kind of like Google Suite or Microsoft Office Online. Literally everything happens in our web app, so you don't need to download anything besides the data you collect at the end. So that makes us pretty different from other options out there. As you go through the crash course or you get to play with the demo studies, hopefully you'll see that the coding language we use is relatively simple and it uses familiar terminology like response, stimuli, trial, block. We take data security very seriously. So you really should not have any concerns about the handling of your data. And as we've mentioned multiple times, we're very responsive. So you don't need to do technical support with your workers. In fact, one of the posts on our blog that Noah mentioned, let me just pull that up here. This tutorial on creating a quote unquote compensation hit for Mechanical Turk workers. This came out of sometimes there might be a glitch and the hit would become disconnected, so your participant would have to drop out. And we built a feature allowing very easy compensation for folks that experience technical difficulties. So I want to really quick just show the different steps that are involved in launching a study on Mechanical Turk. Go back to Zoom here. Okay, so we do have another tutorial on the steps you'll need to go through. First, if you are going to recruit participants through Turk, rather than sending them a link and just having them do the study on FindingFive and figuring out how to compensate them on your own, you'll need to go through the steps of creating an Amazon Web Services account and creating a new IAM user or Identity and Account Management user. I wish I could show you this process. It's pretty straightforward, and like I said, we do have a tutorial on how to do that. But I'm just going to leave that to you guys to figure out. You do need a credit card to set up that IAM user, so just keep that in mind. Once you set up your Amazon Web Services account and your IAM user, you're going to get an access key and a secret. And when you go to FindingFive, you'll have your own account profile. So this is my personal profile here. And when you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see that we ask you for your AWS access key and your AWS access secret. So that information that Mechanical Turk gave you, you'll just pop that right in there. And then once you do that, you will be ready. Here's just a study that we have set up showing folks how to use the barrier feature. It's a tutorial you can find on our news.findingfive.com. But if you go here, like Shiloh was showing us earlier, you'll see a sessions tab. You can click on sessions. We have no active or scheduled sessions for this particular study, but I'm going to create a new one. And rather than doing the study through FindingFive, I'm going to actually do it on Turk so that I can recruit participants from around the world. You'll see a pop-up menu here that's going to ask, do I want to start the study in sandbox mode, or do I want to go into full production? So I'm actually collecting data from participants. One best practice is to always try your study in sandbox mode first. It ensures that workers don't get frustrated when there are errors in your study. But let's just pretend we did that already, and we're now moving on to production. So we are ready to set up a session and collect data from participants through Turk. You want to create a name for your study that is informative, recognizable, typically short, a description that sounds enticing to workers, and you can give this particular session a name. I don't remember if Shiloh's session list actually used names for her different studies.
It did not.
Okay, you can do that. Otherwise, FindingFive will assign a selection of numbers and letters to give you a session name. But you could call it, first set of participants. And then some details on what the embedded window should look like, the size of it. Move on to next. You'll be asked additional questions about the participation restrictions. So how many participants do you want to run in this particular session? What's the estimated duration of your study? Do you want the study to time out? So if a participant walks away in the middle of completing your study, should that session, or should that hit for them stop? You can also set different features like blocking participants who have completed a past session of the study so that they can't keep doing your study over and over again. Block participants who attempted but failed to complete a past session. So perhaps those folks that timed out, maybe now you want to make sure they can't attempt again, and ensure that workers have to be over the age of 18. All right, we can do geolocation restrictions for Turk. I'm gonna try to go through this really quick. If you have other study sessions on your user account, you can restrict participation in this particular session based on what they've done before. So if you have a multi-session study, you can make sure they've done part 1 before moving on to part 2. Likewise, you can block participants who have completed part 1 from participating in part 2. And then compensation. So in terms of best practices, there's a lot of papers out there that I can share links to about guesstimates of how much you should reward participants in order to ensure that you're being fair and ethical. Going very quickly here. You'll also be asked to select a consent form. These are just the silly consent forms that I've uploaded to my account, but you'll want to include a consent form that you have approved through your IRB. You'll get to see a preview of it here. And then we have some information about sharing data with us. Once you go through and agree to all of these features and identify the different restrictions you want to have on your participants, you are ready to go and your HIT will be active relatively soon.
To be clear though, you don't have to agree to any of those to launch a session.
Ah, great. Okay, I take it back.
Any of these 3 things, right?
Right,
This is the stuff that we're asking for, if you don't mind, so that we can learn more about how people use the platform, what's successful and what's not successful, especially in terms of Turk integration.
Right. So again, in terms of best practices, we really strongly encourage you to try running your study first in sandbox mode if you're using Turk. Consider the possible distractions a worker might encounter when they're doing your study. We could have a participant who is walking away from their computer every 5 minutes or has loud noises in the background. So consider quality assurance when you are preparing your study for online deployment. You'll want to have really clear instructions and some way of ensuring that people are following your instructions. Keep in mind, folks are not doing this study in your lab. You don't have control over the distractions that they may experience. So we have some features in FindingFive that can hopefully help you overcome those issues. We have catch trials, which we strongly encourage you to use if you're deploying your study online. You can identify how often you want these catch trials to occur, but they basically would be ensuring that the participant is not just clicking yes to everything and they're actually paying attention to what's occurring. Noah's description of conditional branching earlier also could be a way for you to engage in quality assurance and ensure that participants are using the kind of accuracy you want in your study. And I think that's...
Can I jump in with one little thing? I know there was, in retrospect, I should have asked her if she'd be willing to say something or prepare something for me to say. But there was one of my and Shiloh's colleagues from Shiloh's days at the University of Arizona actually did a study where she did it in FindingFive, and she specifically wanted to see how participants performed in the lab versus over Mechanical Turk.
Mm-hmm.
And in her case, I mean, despite all of these warnings that we give, right? I mean, they did consider these things when they designed the experiment. But despite these warnings, actually the Mechanical Turk workers performed better than the undergraduates at the University of Arizona. They just got a little bit cleaner data from them than they did from the undergrads who were in the lab. So despite our warning,
studies,
and you should take these issues seriously, but don't be discouraged. Online data can actually be pretty good.
Yeah, lots of really nice published studies comparing in-lab data and Mechanical Turk data.
Yeah.
Just one last thing we might want to mention is that currently the only way to automatically pay your participants is if they are through Mechanical Turk. However, we are going to be implementing that feature through FindingFive, hopefully in as few as a couple months. So there is the possibility for you to not have to have your participants create a worker account on Mechanical Turk in order to be automatically compensated.
Okay, so I think that's all the questions. I mean, there's one random question. I don't know if you answered already. Does FindingFive use JS Psych?
No. Yeah, we don't use any sort of third-party packages of that sort. I mean, you know, experimental kind of stuff. No.
Right. Let's see. So one person is forming a question right now. So this is like a real-time question I'm relaying. Any chance of some good example papers for comparison between MTurk and, I'm assuming they meant like conventional data collection? Do you have any?
Oh yeah. Let me
find them somehow.
Let me get some citations and I'll put them in the Google Doc.
Exactly. So there's another Google Doc. It's a separate one. I'm just going to link to it now. That just has a list of resources that, you know, feel free anyone else to add to that, but there will be some references there for you if you're interested.
Great. Thank you. Let's
see. Are there tools for embedding ghost links in trials to weed out AMT bots? That's an interesting question.
No, we have not done that. Although in our particular case, we've kind of been monitoring. We were expecting bots to be an issue, and it kind of hasn't been for our researcher users that I'm aware of. It's not something that's really been an issue for us so far, so we haven't really done anything like that.
Right. That's great. Let's see. I don't know if I missed any questions, but if I missed one, feel free to reiterate that question on the doc so that I'll make sure to catch it. But one thing I maybe was curious if you know a little bit about the demographics of the MTurk community or anything like that.
There's also published papers exploring that each year, so I can include links to those.
That's fantastic. So yeah, I guess we're getting close to the end here. If people still have questions, please add them. But I think this might be a good place to stop here. So with the end of the session, I'm just curious again, like if people are trying this out, they are looking for help or assistance, so they just contact you through their normal, you know, information that's listed on the website. Is that just the way to do it there? Okay.
Yeah, depending on the particular things that you need, there might be a email address that feels more suited, but at the end of the day, all the different email addresses go to the same people.
Right.
So yeah, any of them that you find that you send an email to, we'll get back to you.
Okay, well, I want to thank you guys tremendously. Thank you so much. Again, this was last minute for me, but even more last minute for you guys because I had like an extra day on you to get this started. So thank you so much for jumping at the last minute and doing this. And I can imagine this is going to be, useful to a lot of people. Again, this recording will be posted online at some point, hopefully very soon. Let's see, what else did I want to say there? I'm imagining that since so many people aren't able to collect data, there's going to be a surge in interest in this. Plus, I imagine also, unfortunately, a surge in people that are using Mechanical Turk because of, needing money. So that's going to be hopefully consistent there. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to try something. I have no idea how this is going to work, but I'm going to try unmuting everybody simultaneously and then asking them all to give a very big round of applause for our presenters. So if everyone out there is listening, please just get ready, okay? I'm going to unmute you all, and then once I've unmuted you, I want you to start applauding, and then I'm just curious to hear how this is going to actually sound, and my dog is probably going to freak out. All right, ready? 3, 2, 1. Right. Okay, my dog just barked. So he's upset that this happened. He's mostly upset that I clapped, but thank you all for participating in that. So I think now what we'll do is we'll just stop for half an hour for lunch, come back at 12:45, and we're going to have some presentations on neuroimaging and other sorts of data like anaphasia and other sort of atypical populations in terms of data sets that are available already online. And then additionally, kind of a discussion about how to go about just asking people for data, which maybe is the easiest and quickest way to get data in the short term, which I think is quite possible. Noah and Patty, is that? Okay, sorry. And Shiloh, if you want to come back, that's great, but don't feel obliged. And I'm sure you've got plenty of things to work on, so I'd love to have you again, but no worries about that. And so I guess, oh, sorry, I think I ended up muting you guys. So I'm gonna try unmuting you. Okay, yeah, so I'll see everyone back at 12:45, and I will be sending out information about where to find the videos once they're finally posted and available. Okay, and I will see you guys at 12:45.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Zoom recording. And I will stop sharing. Okay, good. Okay, so it's 12:45. I think people are still just starting to file back in here. Looks like the number is increasing again. That's great. Just to let everyone know that didn't hear before, we actually had a great turnout for the first session. We had over 100 people. And this will all be posted online. If there's a recording that's going automatically for Zoom, and it's a great tool, by the way, for those of you that don't know yet. Zoom will automatically record all of your session, and then it will post it, and then you can download it and edit it and do everything else that you might need to do. So now up next, so we just had a long workshop on FindingFive, which is this great platform for doing online data collection for psycholinguistic experiments or any other kind of psychophysical measures. And now I'd really love to welcome Florian Schwartz. And he gave some great presentations at CUNY and has also kindly agreed to talk about PCIbex, which is based on ibex. It's an online platform similar to FindingFive, but been around for a bit longer and has some perhaps more flexibility, other features. So Florian is going to just talk about that for about 15 minutes or so. And again, if you have questions, I want to direct you to this online Google Doc that we have. I'm going to copy the link and put that back into the messages, the chat box down here. So if you have any questions, please go to the Google Doc and just, there should be a section for Florian's presentation there, PCIbex overview, and just go ahead and add your questions there. And we'll do our best to do those out loud. If you put your name, I can unmute you and you can ask your question in person, but I'm happy to ask that for you. And if we don't get to your question, it will always be answered on the Google Doc by the end of this, well, at some point, probably by the end of the day or so, we'll get the questions all answered. So with that, I'd like to welcome Florian.
All right, well, thank you so much for having me and for doing this. I guess I'll go ahead and share my screen if that is possible. And let me just sort of, okay, good. All right. So by way of background, let me just say, so this has basically been grown over the years in my lab by Jérémy Zehr, who was a postdoc on an NSF grant, and is still now at Penn and continues to work on this. And we basically just started using IBEX. People from linguistics especially may be familiar with it. A lot of people there use it. And we really liked it, and we were really happy about everything you could do. But as with many of these web platforms, we felt too restricted by sort of the templates and the limitations of only being able to do certain types of things. So basically over time, what we tried to develop, what Jeremy tried to develop, is sort of an add-on on top of IBEX that allows a lot more flexibility. The basic idea is it's code-based in a sense, but it doesn't require any real programming or coding skills. It's all JavaScript-based, but you don't need to know any JavaScript. And basically, we created a language on top of JavaScript to facilitate all these things that is sort of maximally concise, but also transparent and gives you full control. Simple things turn out to be pretty simple in terms of the code, but you then have the ability to really control things quite a bit more. So we have the website here. This is, you may be familiar with the IBEX farm. If you heard about IBEX, we now host our own PCIbex farm, and it's all on this website, PCIbex.net. There's an extensive tutorial, and there's also a webinar video there that we did for the LSA some time ago that walks you through things, but you can also walk through everything on your own. Everything about PCIbex is free and freely accessible, and one thing that I think is really exciting also for getting beginners started. I have undergraduate students do class projects on this sort of thing. You create an account, and within minutes, basically, you can have a basic experiment sort of set up. So in order to do that, so here's a quick show of the tutorial. Obviously, I don't have time to go through anything here in great detail, but you just go to this IBEX farm, and what you see there, oops, I'm sorry, I have the Zoom controls in the way for clicking on the browser. Once you log into the farm, you basically get a list of your experiments here. And this is what you see right away. Something that's also really exciting about the capabilities here is that everything is directly integrated with GitHub. So the way it works, and if you walk through the tutorial, you'll see how this works. You can, if somebody, we post a lot of experiments and a lot of examples and templates of experiments on GitHub. And if you have the link for that, you just put this information here when you create a new experiment or you have an existing experiment, and you hit sync, and that will contribute all the resources and everything that's needed for the experiment directly here. So this is also ideal. We've done this for a few studies that in published work, where you basically get instant replicability. Anybody who would want to run this just needs to create an account on the PCIbex farm, hit sync from the published experiment, and they have the exact experiment that we've run before. So there's a bunch of stuff to look at here. Again, I'm not going to walk through all that much, but you can, some things that are noteworthy and different from IBEX, the old style IBEX, is that you can upload a lot of resources here directly. So you see a bunch of MP3 and image files here. And this is the experimental stimuli. Right now that is still limited to 64 megabytes. We're looking into expanding that, but that for normal experiments should already get you quite far. All the editing is done through the script window here. So this right here is an illustration of, let me actually show you the simple one first, I'm sorry. So when it starts out, basically, you just get this very simple script window here. And you can start typing your code. Obviously, you need to learn how to do all of that code. And maybe actually to give you just a very general sense, and I apologize if I'm jumping around here. I did not have much time to prepare. So if you want to sort of see the sample experiments that we walked through in this tutorial, you just click on this link here. And here's sort of an illustration of what this might look like.
The fish swims in a tank which is perfectly square.
So we have some images displayed here. We have this text, which just for fancy illustration is actually unfolding with the audio that's being played back. And you can now select an image by either
The
pressing
deer
a
run in a
key
wood which is extremely sparse.
or by using the mouse. This is
The sheep
both of
roams in a
these
pen which is strikingly red.
are possible. I'll stop going through the trials. There's just a few of them. To just give you a rough sense of what the code behind this sort of experiment looks like. Here is the core trial template. So in PCIbex, you can work with template trials and then feed all the information from a CSV file. So you basically create elements. The core syntax of IBEX is such that you create elements like a text element, and then you can modify its properties, and then you can carry out actions like printing it onto a screen. You can set timers. This sort of thing is called a selector in order to be able to click on parts of what's displayed on the screen. And this bit here, and I'll show maybe a little bit from the tutorial with more elaborate code, is an extremely useful feature for anybody working with sort of elaborate visual stimuli. This sort of what we call a canvas element, just like a painting canvas, you can very freely control where to put images. So let me just scroll here. I'm sorry, to the illustration of the canvas element. So you basically create a pixel area on the screen, or in the browser window rather, and within that you can put images and text and anything else visual wherever you like. You can overlay things. And this is really a great a tool for visual stimuli. A lot of limitations, and this is true of the old IBEX and other platforms as well, so that putting things on the screen where you want them is hard because everything gets executed sequentially and is basically printed out line by line underneath each other. This canvas element basically gets beyond that and gives you complete freedom about where to put things. So that's an extremely useful feature here. Let me just sort of maybe highlight a couple of other things about the platform. We have a pretty good integration of various recruitment tools. So we use this a lot with Prolific, which is a great online recruitment for scientific purposes, an alternative worth considering to Amazon Mechanical Turk. And we also use it with Sona, which many universities use for internal subject pools. So we get participants for course credit through that internally, and all of this is fully integrated, and it's all described here. And even there's even a section here on how to extract the data from IBEX, PCIbex, and analyze it in R. So there's a lot of code scripts here. Something else that's worth mentioning is that there's a really good documentation and support. So there's a forum on the website, and Jeremy very carefully tends to this. Many of your questions may already be answered there if you check there. And so you can post comments there or send them to us at the email address that we have here. Let me perhaps, in sort of closing, and maybe we have even a minute or two for questions, otherwise, also mention that there are some more advanced capacities that are not sort of ready boilerplate if you get something on PCIbex, but we do have access or can give access to people's both microphones and video cameras. So for linguists, if you're interested in production, that may be something that's useful. You can actually very easily do audio recordings. And ultimately, you can also do use the webcam, and in principle, the capacities are there based on that. For allowing something like web-based eye tracking. Now, this is nowhere near ready to go, and we'd actually be very happy to have other people chime in if they want to sort of get involved in working with this, but it's basically working like any other eye tracker. It tries to identify features in the visual input from the camera as you look at different parts of the screen. Now, one shouldn't have any illusions about the accuracy of this. You might be able to do something like, are you looking at the left half of the screen or the right half? But for many visual world type studies in linguistics, for example, and psycholinguistics, that's already really useful. There are issues with that. You can imagine that that involves a lot of data storage, and data storage is an issue for the results as well. So on the PCIbex farm that we offer, space is limited. You can easily set up your own farm. This is true of the old IBEX and of our PCIbex farm as well. Everything is open source and the code is freely accessible, so that way you can get around things. But here we're of course looking at much more advanced type of features. So we're really excited to get this out there. We're very happy to answer any questions. If we have a couple of minutes, William, maybe I'll stop sharing right now and just get back on video, and I'm happy to answer any questions that come up, either from you as things that you've seen on the Google Doc.
Yes, so one thing that popped up in the Google Doc that got plussed is actually from Noah Nelson, who's from FindingFive, and I'm just going to unmute you, Noah, if that's all right, so you can go ahead and ask your question to Florian directly.
Hi, Florian. This is great. I hadn't known about PCIbex before this. This is really cool stuff. So I'm actually wondering about the SONA and prolific integration that you guys have and what that kind of looks like, how it works.
Right, yeah, sure. So basically the thing that's needed and that the other integrations those platforms offer, basically how it works and how it works in PCIbex is that you have to include, say, for SONA, the SONA ID in the link that sends people to PCIbex. And you just, you have a thing that's called ID, ID question mark equals, and then the SONA ID. And that allows you, then there's some script add-ons that you need to add in your PCIbex script to save that as a value for a variable. And basically you just keep that stored throughout. And at the very end of the experiment, you have a return link to SONA, and it's the same for prolific, where again, since you have stored that value, you can incorporate that, and then you get linked back to SONA, let's say, with that information, and they typically have the sort of return link where you can come back once you've completed, and then the SONA system, let's say, will automatically register that somebody has reached the end of experiment and therefore should be counted as having completed the study and get credit. That way, especially for large studies, you don't have to go through manually to approve all the participations if you don't want to.
Cool. Quick follow-up. Did I understand correctly? Are participants then having to download a JavaScript?
No, absolutely not. So okay. All that PCIbex generates is just a web link that people go to. The way, maybe another worthwhile thing to mention just briefly is that, I don't know how you guys handle it. I haven't heard about FindingFive before, so I'm excited to check that out. Is that basically all the downloading of stimuli, and this is especially relevant for audio and image files where a bit more data gets introduced. And if you're interested in the timing, you can download all the stimuli before people start the experiment. They don't have to do anything, but automatically we usually do it as soon as they start reading the consent document. There's a download in the background. There's different methods of doing it, but you can set it so that trials don't start until all the resources are available. This has two pretty important advantages. One, right, there is just no experience of lags and so on once the experiment starts for the participant, no matter what their internet speed is, because they only do the experiment once everything is there. And it also means that within each trial, the timing accuracy is actually really quite decent. Obviously, we're limited to what people's devices are like in terms of keyboard accuracy, which usually is what, plus minus 100 milliseconds or something. But we've done a lot of response time studies, let's say, when the effect sizes are big enough. You can easily do this, and the accuracy really is good and is not affected by internet speed because everything gets preloaded. So a little bit of a tangent beyond what you asked, but they don't have to do anything but click on the link. And then automatically stuff gets downloaded in the background, and then the experiment will run.
Yeah, okay. So that like script download you mentioned was just on the researcher side.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
There's like a few but very small clarification questions.
Yeah.
So I'll just ask all three maybe. So if you have an account on IBEX Farm, do you need to create a new one for PCIbex?
Yes, they're completely separately hosted, and there's no direct transferring either, although everything that works on IBEX should work on PCIbex too, so you can migrate your stuff, but they're completely separate offerings by different people, yes.
Cool. And is PCIbex free?
It is absolutely free, and we intend to keep it that way, and yeah.
Right, okay, and then there's this one question that I've got a couple plus ones. So maybe Noah and Florian, maybe we'll have an impromptu kind of discussion here. Could you discuss the sort of pros and cons of these various platforms? Maybe this is probably a longer discussion than we have time for, but I don't know if you guys both maybe have some just very brief comments you could say to, because people say, the quote, whoever wrote this says, everybody says, quote, check them out and decide for yourself, but they said they feel overwhelmed and this choice is sort of taxing. And, are there some quick and dirty comments you guys could make about that?
Yeah, sure. So there's a number of platforms out there, and I had shared something from a Princeton workshop with William that maybe you can also pass on to participants on these various online platforms. I think one big dimension of variation is basically, how code heavy versus how what you see is what you get, like these platforms are. Some of them have pretty visual interfaces that are pretty intuitive and good to work with. I think that tends to come with a trade-off in terms of how much control and power you have about what you want to do. So I guess, it's, I'll just, since we don't have much time, I'll just briefly say our aim always was to sort of find a good compromise of give maximum flexibility, but in terms of creating trial structures that unfold bit by bit. Things could happen based on where you click. So there's really a great amount of freedom, but with a lot of transparency and with a lot of ease of use without having to really know how to code. So you have to be willing to learn the PCIbex code language, but it's all pretty transparent. And I think with our documentation online, most people get off the ground pretty quickly. And Jeremy is very quick to answer questions. So you don't need to know JavaScript. If you do know it, you can do even more. But I think that's sort of one major range, dimension across which these platforms vary. I'll leave.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think one other dimension of interest is essentially cost. So FindingFive and PCIbex are free. There are other ones that maybe strike a better balance between ease of use and power, but they cost money. So there's like an extra dimensionality of trade-off. And just for those people who are interested, if you're trying to like decide whether you want to try using PCIbex or FindingFive, for example, like I would just say based on this little bit of presentation that I've gotten from Florian, it seems like your guys' interface allows people to write some actual JavaScript if they want to, which means it's probably a little more powerful with what you can do than what we can do in FindingFive, because we just don't allow you to write the JavaScript directly yourself to do your own custom things. So that's one dimension to consider, but I think, again, that comes with a trade-off. Your language looks more like JavaScript than ours does. So it might, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that matters to users or not, or if it's a barrier or not. But.
Right, so I guess this is maybe a good start for a competition, right? So maybe half the people in the, the tutorial here can try using PCIbex and half can use FindingFive, and then they can switch and we can see, whose experiments were more successful and got better, publications and things.
But which platform do we host the study to evaluate performance?
we need randomly assigned participants though, right? We are.
I see. All right. It's getting hot and heavy here. All right. So there's some more questions, but I think those can be answered offline in the Google Doc. So
sure.
We also maybe have some time at the end of the session to come back if people are still around and want to discuss this more.